Hello everybody, Rob Gardner here at DFS Today on Twitter, and we've done a lot of work on our new roster gen system, and wanted to take a moment to record a video and just kind of run you through how our roster gen works. Now our roster gen is a feature for our professional and VIP levels. If you signed up for our beginner level, there's an option on the main page when you're logged in to upgrade to professional or VIP. And the difference between professional and VIP is essentially professional gets you the roster gen, VIP gets you access to these expert rankings and default exposures. And so the cool thing with that is when you come into a slate, if you're VIP, you can click this match expert exposure button, and it will actually load all these exposures in for your players and give you a baseline to start with roster gen. This baseline isn't meant to be like the most optimal set of exposures, but it's meant to be something that should be somewhat profitable and gives you a starting point and then allows you to tweak. And so the idea is you start here, and then you can kind of come in and decide, I want to bring fulls down to 60% and bring, maybe Maya up to 70, and kind of make your own tweaks and edits. We do want you to think for yourselves a little bit, but it's nice to have a starting place for sure. Now, if you don't have the VIP plan, if you're just professional, these will show up as locks. But again, you can go into each player, click the thing, decide what percentages you want, and go through and create it. So I'm going to go ahead and match exposure just so we can kind of show you the next thing. So this is the dashboard. Every sport has one. Once you've set your exposures, you can come in here to the roster gen, and you'll be greeted with this screen. And there's a whole bunch of things going on here. First, we have no exposure players display or don't display. If you click display, then all the players have 0% exposure show up here. If you hit don't display, then they disappear. It starts out not displaying it because generally speaking, you don't need to see the players you don't have. There's a whole bunch of options here we'll go through here in a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about the total exposure and salary exposure. What this is intended to do is make sure that your exposures are within a proper range. Now, if they're not within the range, it's not the end of the world, but you do have to understand what happens here. So here we can see for DraftKings, the proper exposure is 600%, FanDuel, the proper exposure is 700%, and essentially it's 100% for each roster spot. And so let's just pretend like right now we've got $4.99. We're low. What that basically means is that all these exposures are going to end up coming out a little bit higher than the 600 or 700% because we're a little undersaturated. If this was say 850%, then the numbers would all come out a little bit lower because we were oversaturated. Likewise, not only do you just have a raw exposure that you have to hit, but there's also a salary exposure. This basically is the average salary per percentage point, and it may sound really complicated, but it just means if you have too much exposure on high-level players, then you're too high, and your lower salary players are going to get higher exposure than you expected. If this number is too low, then you have too much exposure to your low salary players, and now your high salary players are going to get a little bit higher exposure. And so again, you get baseline numbers here. You want to try and get it close, but please don't panic if you don't get it close, because you can always run as many roster gens as you want and get a feel for how it comes out. And if you don't like it, you can tweak and go from there. For sports that have a flex position, you get options. You get a list of all the available positions that could be, and you get options for what percentage you want to go to a particular thing. So let's say like WNBA is a forward heavy sport. If you want to go 75% forward and 25% guard, you can set these, and that'll do that. And then the cool thing down here that we love is obviously you can set all the exposures in the dashboard, but if you want to come in and make final tweaks, you can come in here, set somebody to 25%, it updates. If you were to set somebody up to like 55%, they'll actually move over here to the high column. And so it kind of gives you a great visual really quickly of your high exposure, medium exposure, and low exposure plays. One thing we love here is you can actually save your exposures. And so, I can set this as exposure 1 and hit save. And now our exposure has been saved. And if I come back to the exposure screen, we can reset all of our exposures to 0, but I can set exposure 1 and set it. So let's just say I come in here, I set Charles to 10%, And now I come in here and pull exposure 1. Bam, she's back at 50%. Lots of things you can use this for, but one of the really great things is, let's say you've got a situation where there's a player that's questionable in a slate. You can actually set up one set of exposures for that player playing, another set of exposures for that player being out, save both percentages, and pull them up on the fly at any point you want. Once you've got it where you want, now we can click this DK Lineups tool. And when you've got your DK Lineups tool, you get greeted with this screen. This is kind of where the heart of roster gen happens. And so let's just say we wanted to create 50 rosters. So I'm just going to call this 50 rosters. You can call whatever batch name you want. Really, the name is just to help you decide, have a differentiator. And then you have a minimum salary and a maximum salary. And this basically decides how much gap you're willing to allow in your salaries. Generally, you're going to want this type, but there's going to be certain situations where, for certain sports, you're going to want more gap, smaller slates. There's certain NASCAR races where filling your salary really doesn't matter. Sometimes PGA matches are like that, and so you've got the flexibility to do that. And then you'll see this option here that says create new batch. This basically says, you can create up a new batch, or, for example, let's say you wanted 50 rosters that were tight and 50 rosters that were loose. You could come in here and pick an existing batch, and instead of it creating rosters in a new batch, it would add them to the existing batch. And batches it's just like saving your exposure. It's a separate chunk of rosters that you can save, edit, manipulate, manage, download, prepare for upload onto a site. And so again, you create your two exposures for two different scenarios that might happen. You can go ahead and create 50 rosters for each and have downloadable files ready for DraftKings or FanDuel or Fantasy Draft that you can pop in on a moment's notice based on the situation. That versatility is huge in daily fantasy sports, and it's a flexibility we're really excited about. But we're going to create a new batch here. We're going to choose 50 rosters. There's an option for the Stacks tool. We actually have a separate video that explains how Stacks works, so you can check that out on our YouTube channel if you want to get into the Stacks and how that works. But right now, we're going to leave it non-Stacks, and tagging is another roster gen video that we have. So if you want to know about tagging, definitely check that out. But we're going to go 50 non-stacks here between 49,000 and 50,000. We're going to create rosters. When this does this, bam, it's going to start generating these rosters. Now, if this wheel ever gets stuck and doesn't work, chances are you don't have enough exposure to create the rosters. You've already created all the unique rosters possible, because this will actually check to make sure that every roster is unique. Or something else is going on with your thing. Now, usually it'll display a message here if there's any issues, and you can let us know. But if you have any trouble with that, feel free to check in with us on Slack chat. We'll be happy to walk you through it. But most times, people don't have exposure set. They go to try and create, and it doesn't work. Once it's done creating, we get this really cool screen here. And this screen will show you what your target exposure was, what it actually came out to, and the differential. And so you can see visually here very quickly, here's our highs, our mids, our lows, and how far off we are. Now, why aren't these perfect? Well, for one, we are checking for unique rosters, and so because we're checking for unique rosters, you're going to just based on the salary distribution and how things work out, you're going to end up heavier on some and lighter on others. Two, again, remember those percentages we were low on, and so that's going to cause us to be off in certain areas as well. The more rosters you create, the closer you're going to be to your target percentages. But you're never going to be exact no matter what you do. But this is a great overview of where you're at. And then you're greeted with your rosters. As you can see, these are color-coded by team, which is nice and convenient. Kind of helps you to see from stack perspective what each thing they are. You have an edit and a delete option. Now, anytime you can get back to this screen when you come back here, if you click DK Lineups, you'll have your batch. All you have to do is hit View Batch, and voila, it's back up. Now, let's just say you're really upset that Maya Moore is at 10% and 10% over, and Tina Charles is 6% under. You can come down here and find a Maya Moore lineup, hit edit. You'll be greeted with an edit screen. This kind of looks similar to what you see on the daily fantasy sites. And we can go ahead and come in here, and we'll get rid of little and more, and we'll go ahead and find Charles and find somebody that fits in. We'll go Hamby, hit save. And this will bring us back to the screen. And now you can see our roster has been replaced, Charles and Hamby. And if we come back here, now we're 8% over and 4%. And so you can come in and tweak these to your heart's content if you want. Wiggle it around a little bit, get it a little bit closer as a great way to go. Once you're done with this and you're like, hey, I like this batch, now we can click this download batch button. And I'll just go ahead and delete this batch here, get this out of the way so you can see that. When you click this download button, this is going to download a file. And this file is intended to go to the upload lineups section. So DraftKings and FanDuel, there's two different ways to upload lineups. There's the upload lineups and there's the edit entries lineups. Fantasy Draft just does the upload lineups. This is for the upload lineups thing. So if you want to put a bunch of lineups into DraftKings or FanDuel or Fantasy Draft and then enter them into the contest, this is where you would do it. If, for example, you've already registered for a contest, not a problem. We've got you covered. You come in here and you go to DK Edit Entries. You put your Edit Entries file in here, which I don't have one ready at the moment. Once you're in here, it'll give you an option for all the batches. You select the 50 rosters batch that you want, and it will create a new download file for you. Then that download file is what you put into Edit Entries on DraftKings or on FanDuel, because Fantasy Draft doesn't have that option, and it will replace all of those rosters on the fly immediately. Again, phenomenally powerful tool. If you think about this paired with the multiple exposures and the multiple batches, you can have 3 different batches of rosters ready to go based on 3 different situations, and with 60 seconds before lineup block, you can upload that edit entry file. Now, we always recommend you test your edit entry files and you test your download files ahead of time. Don't wait till 30 seconds before, find out that there's some problem with your edit entry file and get screwed. So what I will do is, if I'm creating 2 different situations, I'll create both edit entry files 30 minutes, 45 minutes in advance. I will upload both edit entry files, make sure that they work. Once I know they work, then I can sit back and wait, and at that 60-second mark, I can make a decision and upload that file. So that's essentially how the roster gen works. Again, we've got videos on tagging, we've got videos on our stack tool, we even have videos on our mid-slate import, which is basically a really slick tool that allows you to halfway through a slate do a roster gen with locked players on your unlocked players, which is great for multi-day slates in football, CFL, WNBA. You can actually continue to roster gen throughout the slate. There's videos on that, so make sure you check those out on YouTube. Obviously, you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get updates when all those videos come. And one last thing I will highlight before we get out of this video, which is really cool, is if you come in here and look at these rosters, you'll notice this flex position, Minnesota and Atlanta are the late game. And so every roster, this flex position is a Minnesota or Atlanta player unless guard is all from the New York San Antonio game. And so any place where you see San Antonio here, San Antonio, the guard is San Antonio, New York. We go ahead and figure out the flex for you. Why? Because it's very important with rosters, especially, again, across multiple slates, to have that flex position be in the latest game possible so that you have the most time to edit it. You never want your late game player stuck in an early slot. Why? Because let's say in the late game, Rebecca Brunson gets scratched an hour before the game. If Rebecca Brunson's up here at the top, all you can replace her with is guards. When she's in the flex position, you can replace her with guards or forwards. It's just one of those things that's very valuable in roster gen. And it doesn't even have to be a scratch. Sometimes you get late in a contest, take NFL, you're going into the Monday night game, you're in third place, you're behind somebody, and you need to pivot to have a chance to win that contest. You got to make sure that player's in a flex spot. And so the latest game possible always shows up in the flex spot. Great tool that we have. So that's it for our roster gen. If you have any questions, you can always hit me personally on Twitter at DFS Today. You can tweet at our account on Twitter at FantasyDgens, or hop in the Slack chat, ask for help. We will be happy to help you. Thanks so much for watching this video. Check our other videos out for more in-depth information on tagging, our stacking tool, and the DK mid-slate import. That's it for me. Have a good day.